window. Like I was all in. It was all about finding my place and like the type of impact that I can have. And that's why I advocate so hard for people, because I know that people are carrying a lot of hurt. And I'm not saying that it's good reason to hurt others, but I would much rather hone them in, service them, make sure that they're taken care of in order to eliminate that chance of them going out one night and taking someone else's life, because that's literally what we're living through right now.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode. Today we have a tremendous treat for you guys. We have an incredible woman, I should say a newly elected Alderwoman, Julia Ramirez. Julia Ramirez, welcome.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
I am so inspired by your story, and for our audience, I've been trying to get this gal for months, and we set up a time,
Yes.
and we canceled because of your time schedule. So thank you for making
Yeah,
time.
of
Even
course.
today, we almost lost you today,
Yeah.
right? But we're sitting here at her campaign office. She's
right.
newly elected Chicago Alderwoman.
That's correct, yes.
And what's amazing about your story, you're just not an older woman, but it's just how you got in office.
Yeah.
And it was just based on a decision to cause change.
That's right.
And something that's heavily in your heart, and you wanted to impact your community, which you already were impacting because of your occupation before you were elected an older woman. So please share your story.
Oh my
and
goodness.
Thanks a lot, Julia, because
No.
you're like the epitome of that. Like you are the grassroots,
Thank you.
South side of Chicago, Gage Park, right? It's with the ward you
Brighton
represent.
Park and
Brighton.
McKinley Park.
Oh, McKinley Park. See,
Yes,
I'm
but
not-
Gage Park is right on the other
Okay,
side.
so I'm not really from
all
Chicago.
Southwest
but-
side, yeah.
Okay. All the Chicago people's like, hey, who is that guy? Get that guy
Yeah.
out of there. So McKinley Park is your ward?
McKinley Park and Brighton Park.
Okay.
Yes.
So you represent that ward, and so and
Yes.
you grew up in the area too as well, right?
That's right. That's right. Yes.
Real quick before we go back, what really inspired you to run?
Yeah. So I knew that long term, I
Mm-hmm.
was going to serve people. I was going to specifically serve young people, people who have been involved in juvenile justice system, immigrant people. I think why it resonated with me so much is because of my story, the experience that I had personally, what I had seen my parents go through, my grandparents went through. And so I'm so grateful that the work actually lended to this position of being an alderperson. I don't think that I would have ever imagined myself being an alderperson, but I appreciate you allowing me to share my story,
Yeah.
because I hope that it inspires other people to take up space, because we all deserve to be here. And I'm learning that for myself as
Yeah.
well. So
That's so awesome. And it comes to mind, and one of my favorite Bible verses is that it says that your gifts will make room for you, and it's you are just the epitome of that, And when you said, it just lended it to me, like I lended myself to it. It's like your gifts are just making room for you.
yes.
And you knew from child, since when you were a child, that you were going to serve people,
Yes.
and that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's really touching. It. I know we were talking for over an hour before the show. I know the producer was getting set up, but I'm just amazed how a shoestring budget, right? And those who know Chicago politics, it's very cutthroat. And here you are, a very young Hispanic woman
Yes.
that has everything against you, right? And you made it.
Yes.
And you not just barely win, but you won.
Yes.
You kicked ass.
Yeah.
And so, but
Appreciate that.
take me back, like how this whole thing started, because I'm just eager. I just want to ask you all these questions. I got some of them answered in before the show, but
Yeah.
take us back for our audience. How you got here and
Yeah.
your story.
Yeah, of course. The campaign in specific, or
No, back.
just even further?
Yeah, when you came out of your mother's womb, go ahead.
No, it's really incredible. Like my grandparents migrated from Mexico, and like a lot of recent immigrants, they moved to Pilsen, and they were renting in Pilsen. And my grandparents did everything possible to buy a house. So they ended up moving to McKinley Park.
Okay. So
And-
Pilsen is now a very
Oh.
trendy area of Chicago, those who don't know.
Yes.
But it wasn't always like that. It was a very
That's right.
gang-infested neighborhood.
Yeah.
Correct? Right.
So, when my family moved to Pilsen in the 70s, a lot of folks ended up working in the stockyards and back of the yards. And they would live in a place like Pilsen, back of the yards in specific. And so they worked very close to their jobs. And it was all very industrial. There weren't a lot of trees, there weren't a lot of green space. And, if you visit Pilsen, like you can see how big, a lot of these buildings are. It just would house like massive amounts of people that were coming. And I knew that like my grandparents, they wanted more for their family. They wanted something for themselves, a smaller home, single family home. And they wanted a better education for, my parents and my uncle. So then they moved to a place like the 12th Ward, which is McKinley Park, Brighton Park. And when they were in McKinley Park, they actually shut down their local school. So then my grandparents were like, we need to buy our own home. And they bought one a couple blocks away from another school. And that's where my parents met. My maternal and paternal grandparents, they both bought houses like 2 years away from each other.
Really?
And right around the block from each other. And so my parents met in grade school. And they also went to the local public school. And at that time, they were one of the first Mexican families to move.
Because at that time, it was mostly predominant like Polish people, right? Yeah.
Predominantly Polish families here. Because at that time, a lot of folks didn't have, the money to buy a house. And luckily, my grandparents, they found a way. They bought houses. And, I've heard stories even during the campaign trail, but also through my own family experience about how tough it was being, a Mexican family speaking Spanish. Folks didn't want you to speak Spanish, or you couldn't go hang out with your friends because, their parents didn't want you to bring, someone like my mom over their house.
So your parents experienced a lot of racism against...
Yeah, I mean, things were shifting during that time, and
this is in the 70s?
This was in the 70s, and then many families in Pilsen ended up moving westward, and they, the 12th Ward is now predominantly Hispanic.
Okay.
And, when I grew up, then it was completely different. That's, I knew it to be predominantly Hispanic, and it had changed just between that generation. But interesting enough, there is, some Polish families that have still been here, 90. I've met somebody 100 years old. She lived here all her life.
Really?
And they still host...
In the 12th Ward here?
Here in the 12th Ward. And they still host Mass in Polish. So I know that even though families don't live here anymore, the families, they still come, a lot of folks move west. They come back to the neighborhood and they go to church here.
Keeping the tradition.
Yeah. And I do want to note that, it's always changing, right? That it's every generation changes, and we have a growing Asian population here in the 12th Ward. So folks in the 11th Ward, which is Chinatown, predominantly Chinatown, folks are buying houses. And it's just a similar story that we experienced, a couple decades ago. So now we have a growing Asian population. And I think for me, being an alderperson, it's how do we connect, the things that we have in common, each other's stories? How do we celebrate each other instead of it feeling so different or so anti one another? And so I'm hoping that I can hold space for some of that.
And so growing up, so you grew up in the 12th Ward. Your parents bought a house, right?
And they bought a house right in the middle of both my grandparents. So
that was nice. See, you got the best
so
of
now
both worlds, right?
Exactly.
Right. And your grandparents are still around?
Yes.
Wow, that's a blessing.
It's amazing. Yeah, and I'm the oldest grandchild, so I've just been so blessed because I get to be there for my grandparents. I get to be there, with my family.
They must be so proud.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. Every day, people are always what's happened? Or they always want updates or, there's so many different things.
Wow,
so
that's
they're very
amazing,
included.
Julia.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And
Yes.
so growing up, tell me a little bit about that. And,
Yeah.
because it was rough back then, right?
Oh,
It was already
definitely.
changing.
Yeah. And then, when we talk about how our families were struggling and trying to find a new place, and then the language barriers and all of those things that existed while my parents were trying to grow up. And then we seen gangs that were especially in Brighton Park. I knew them as well growing up. On
Mexican
one side,
gangs?
one side is 2-6, the other side is SD. You know,
Okay.
there's all these like borders that you live in.
Okay.
You know, my dad had to go through that. He lived that.
Your father was a gangbanger?
He did for a short time.
He
Yeah.
dabbled in it a little bit?
Yeah, and then my mom, she came into his life and changed
Sure.
his life, and
Good. The
You
sad
know.
thing about gang life is really that you could be friends in school, but then after school, you're living, it's a block or 2 blocks makes a difference what gang or what side of the
Yeah.
aisle you're going to represent, and I know we
Yeah.
chatted about the tragedies of gangs, and so your dad obviously dabbled in it, but he grew up and
Yeah.
he had a family.
He stepped
right?
away. He
Sure.
stepped away, and like, my mom and my dad, like, they had me very young. I was telling you,
They were
they
17, right?
seniors, yeah,
Okay.
in high school.
Okay.
They went to Cali, but honestly, having both the sides of my family, we were just deeply supported, and they did everything that they could. So then, when they had my brother and I, we were 3 years apart. We went to Catholic school. We actually didn't go to
In the
public
area?
school. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So we went to Catholic school, and so like I guess for me, it's like every generation you try different things. Like you want better,
Sure.
right? And so they set us up. They wanted us to have a different education, so we went to Catholic school, and I will say that I know that was already a privilege. Like I could already tell based off of just the type of programs that I had access to and my neighbors didn't. Or, we had a different kind of uniform, and, we would go to church and we would like be taught so many different things. And I had like noticed those differences when I was
So
little.
being in Catholic school, you notice the advantages
Yeah.
that you had that over the kids that went to the local public school.
Definitely. Yeah. Like, and you could notice them, like, I was only a block away from the local public school, like Brighton Park Elementary.
Sure.
And like, looking back and reflecting, like, I just remember like sharing stories and like, we were a smaller school. So, there was smaller classrooms. And I guess that as a little kid, I just realized it very, very early on. So much so that, I ended up getting a scholarship when I was in 8th grade because I was just like showered with so much support. I had my family, and then I had the school. And so like my principal ended up recommending me for a scholarship. And
So were you a very bright student, smart?
I will say, like, being like the oldest, and like all my uncles, I had a lot of uncles. They'd always play sports with me. I played sports like at a very early age. I just love trying new things. I was like always more adventurous. Top of my class. I loved all that kind of stuff. That kind of always excited
So
me.
that kind of helped you, like, kind of like steer away from the gang life and
Yeah.
and just the trouble that the neighborhood breeds, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Did that kind of help you to kind of steer away from that?
Yeah, I think it's also like learned experience, like because my parents went through it, like they knew how to protect me, and like, and like also it's street smarts, right? Like, my dad like would teach me certain things or like protect us from certain stuff, and like with you notice like gang activity on the corner, and then my dad would like kind of tell me what was happening, and so you kind of like have to dabble in both. It's kind
Sure.
of,
Right.
building that reality of just like protecting yourself, and yeah, thankfully, my parents did everything possible for me and my brother. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, the boarding, so then, I got a scholarship, and it was a scholarship for private schools in the city of Chicago, but then they had opportunities for boarding school. And when I ended up interviewing, they said, we want you to go to boarding school.
Really?
And my parents had never heard of it. I had never heard of it.
That almost sounds like a punishment. You're going to border school.
Well, everyone always asks that, right? And I just wonder, like, do we get that from movies?
Sure.
Like, I'm not, I'm
Right.
not really sure, but I will say, I mean, it's a privilege. Like, it's pretty great.
And where was it?
It was in Pebble Beach, California. So it's
Pebble Beach. Poor
Yes.
you.
yeah, near San Jose, San Francisco.
Sure.
So, and then, if people enjoy golf, then they know. Yeah.
And you went out there your whole high school?
That's right. So Daniel Murphy Scholarship, I got the scholarship, and they would pay for all my flights. They would pay for a parent to go visit me. once a
Really?
year. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
And, I will say it's like, all these opportunities that kind of like everyone's like, we want better for you and we want you to get out of the neighborhood. That's always like kind of the message of like doing better, especially like in a neighborhood like this, a place
Sure.
like this. But what was so hard is that like I went so far away when I was 13 and I was the only Mexican student. And it was predominantly white, and not just like white, but like very affluent white. Like people
Sure.
had a lot of money, and I really didn't know where I fit in, right? And so in a way, it's almost like you have to lose so much of yourself to fit into a place like that.
Okay.
So then when I would come back to the neighborhood, like for the summer, for instance, again, it was like, why is my life so different? Like, why am I seeing things, you know, and getting these things,
It's
but
a
not
culture
everyone
shock,
else?
really,
Oh,
is what it-
definitely. Yeah. So I, you know, like I was telling you earlier, like in a way, without realizing it, I was getting politicized because I had to leave everything I knew, all my friends and my brother behind, you know. And unfortunately, like my brother, you know, he went to the local school, and as a young man, you know, he ended up like hanging out with certain groups, and it wasn't always safe, you know. And so I always like in a way so grateful, but then always wondered like, why me, and why is it set up this way, like why does it have to be? And I will say like by my senior year, I was excited to be able to come back to Chicago, to University of Chicago.
Sure.
Because I kind of felt like, okay, this is my chance to like give back, like to everyone that's always given to me, you know? So because I always felt like my community loved me, they like, you know, uplifted me. And so why not give back, you know? So yeah, I don't know if I'm moving too fast, but
No,
you
no,
know,
not at all.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you did mention earlier before the show that you notice that how people have access to things that most don't. And
Exactly.
that kind of bothered you a little bit, didn't it?
It always bothered me. Like, you know, it's just like,
Even though that you were receiving those privileges, it's kind
Yeah.
of bothered you, or you saw the kind of like unfairness.
it always felt different. And a big part of like my identity is like being of Mexican descent, speaking Spanish. Like I was always proud of that, and I felt like I couldn't always be that. And I always questioned like, why do I have to change? And like, you know, I will say like even through my scholarship, like we would have to do etiquette classes. And
Oh,
like,
really?
Yeah, and like
It's good.
you know, yeah, like you have to look at people in the eye and like handshakes, and you're 13. It's really intimidating spaces, right? And I just dabbling in two different worlds, and I just thought like, why can't my community have all of this? Like, why can't I just be me, and why can't we just like have a really great local school, and why can't I just go to my, you know, Kelly High School? You know what I mean? Like I'd always question that.
When you came back during that time, did you notice the sloppiness of how people communicate, the informalities as you
Yeah.
were being taught how to properly communicate, how to properly introduce yourself, you know?
Yeah.
And then you come back.
I mean, you talk slang.
Yeah,
You're just kind of
yeah.
cool.
What's
like,
happening,
it's-
brother?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
okay.
you dress different. You know, I remember
Right.
people be like, "Oh, you're changing," and I couldn't really like, what is it? Is it right? Is it wrong? You know,
Sure.
trying to like dabble into, you know, all of this. And yeah, I just remember, you know, we used to like wear what's it called, rubber bands around like the bottom of your
Sure.
jeans, and
Okay.
like, you know, Air Force Ones and all these things. But like people didn't dress like that at my high school.
Yeah.
You know, and like I would dress differently. And so I will say, like, I guess in the back of my mind, I always felt like whatever I learned, whatever skills I have, I'm going to bring them back. Like, I want that for other people, you know?
Right.
And so I don't know where that comes from. I just love my community so much, you know?
Right.
And thankfully people felt that. As
Well, it's
I,
your big
you
heart.
know.
Like you said, you always wanted to help people. You knew that.
Yeah.
That was your mission in life, your purpose to always serve others.
Yeah.
And
And
so-
yeah, it's a good point, because I remember, you know, it was a small school, but we were starting up student government, and I was in 4th grade, and like my class was like, you should do it. Like they voted for me. That was the first time I remember being voted for. And ever since then, I was always in student government. Even at my boarding school, I was like the student body president my senior year. And it's crazy because now I'm an alderperson. So
Is it Alderperson or Alderwoman?
Alderwoman. I appreciate
Okay,
you saying
Alderwoman.
Alderwoman.
Okay,
yeah.
get it right.
Yeah, so it's officially Alderperson, but I appreciate you saying Alderwoman. But it's like now that I'm saying that out loud, as it's all reflecting. I'm
So
still
surreal,
reflecting.
right?
Yeah,
Like, yeah.
that it's almost like everything that happened in my life kind of set me up for this because I was always into student government. I always did it.
Yeah.
I always loved it. I just like loved organizing people and loved like facilitating and just like having events and all these things.
Right.
So yeah.
And so you moved back, right? You went to
Yes.
college here,
Yes.
University
Of Chicago.
of Chicago, right? And how was that experience?
Yeah, I think.
And how did you get in there?
Yeah, I ended up getting another scholarship to go there. Yeah.
Okay, that's not fair. That's not fair. Wait, stop, cut. Really?
Yeah.
And
So, yeah, in high school, I like worked my ass off.
yeah, and so your
yeah.
grades and
Oh,
so you
man.
applied at all these scholarships and all these grants.
Yes, applied for everything. I mean, I was part of like everything I could be a part of. We used to have a radio show actually on campus. I had a radio show for 3 years. I was part of like all the sports, part of student government, and then I lived there on campus. So then I was like, working in the dorms. I mean, I was part of everything.
Okay.
And so I, thankfully had another opportunity to get a scholarship. And then, once again, coming back to Chicago, coming down the 55, like from this area all the way to Hyde Park, then I started noticing segregation. And I
Right.
started realizing like, because ultimately, like, even though I was able to go to boarding school, I only really knew this community. Like, I didn't really know the city at large.
Sure.
Because I was still so young. And then I was getting on the 55th Street, and I was like, wait, what's happening here? Like, you cross a certain street, and then there's like all African American.
Yeah.
And then, nicer houses, and then really bad houses. And then, then I started realizing, like, this is happening all over the country.
Yeah.
This isn't just happening to me. Like, in my neighborhood, it's happening all over the city. So then I started, like, when I was at the university, I started working with Latinos Progresando in Little Village. It's a nonprofit that helps immigrant families. They had youth programming.
Well, what's the name of the organization?
Latinos Progresando.
Okay, Progressing
Latinos, yeah.
Okay.
So they're in Little Village, and then I started working there part-time, like through the school, work study.
Sure.
And, it's interesting because at that time, too, I was introduced to somebody running for alderman in the 12th Ward.
Okay.
And I actually am still good friends with him now. So, helping out on campaigns, and I was organizing.
And at that point, you had no clue or no ambition to ever one day I want to run for office, or
Not for me personally.
Okay.
No, I think I always like, most of my career was through organizing and nonprofits. I liked, I guess, interacting with people one-on-one. I had thought at one point, like, maybe I want to be a lawyer.
Sure.
People, I feel like so many people wonder if they want to be a lawyer. But then I just thought, like, no, I actually like the one-on-one interaction with people, serving people in a different way. Direct service is what we call it. And no, but not anything personally.
And your degree is in what?
Social work.
Social work.
So, yeah.
And so you became a social worker.
Yes, yes. Became a social worker. What's really hard about like nonprofit work is that it's usually grants that are like 2 years long. You don't make a whole lot of money. And so I was always kind of like back and forth about like, is this the career that I'm going to stay in? I knew that like, because of all the opportunities I had, like, I just thought like, is this my fullest potential, right? And my brother was killed. It's kind of crazy. Like literally at that point in time, I was thinking of doing something different. I actually thought maybe I'll do communications or work in corporate.
Okay.
So
let's pause there for a minute, because I know this is a very touching subject for you about losing your brother, right? And so your brother dabbled a little bit in the street business and all that, right? And what I mean by that, just trouble. He never really gambanged.
Yeah, no, not a game banger.
So you're in college.
Yeah.
Right? How old were you now?
Yeah, so in between 18 to 23, yeah.
Okay, so you were in your 20s. And
your
brother gets killed at what age?
He's 19.
Okay.
19.
And he was killed by a group of gang members. And he was mistaken.
Mistaken, yeah, definitely.
Mistaken by a gangbanger. and they caught the guys who did it. Tell that story a little bit.
Yeah. So, at that time, it's interesting. I was trying to step away from the work, trying to find my place. And my brother actually was part of one of even the youth programs that I was like supervising just the summer before, like.
He was volunteering or just
No, so we would have like for the summertime,
Okay.
like summer jobs for the
Sure.
youth. And
so he was a part of that.
Yeah, he joined, like it was actually in Pilsen where the
Okay.
program was. He had just started at Malcolm X and he was working at the White Sox Park.
Okay. Malcolm X College.
Malcolm X College. He started working at the White Sox Park. Like he was just living his life. Like
Sure.
he had just graduated high school, and like he was just trying to figure out his way. And then my grandmother had bought him a truck, and so he had went up to the north side. Like, growing up, that's where how it is. It's still kind of existent today.
So
like
he
people
went up
go
for
north.
the weekend, the north side
Yeah.
of the city, where there's bars and there's
Yes.
activity and all
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Okay.
To go hang out. And yeah, he drove up there and it was a Friday night. I remember I had talked to him that day. And it's almost just unreal, like knowing how it ended up happening. Like, so they saw him at an intersection and they mistook him for someone. Like, it was
Sure.
late. Like they saw him at a light. So he
Sure.
drove past them and then they
Made a U-turn and found him.
And they followed him for a very long time. And my brother was trying to get away and he finally took a light. And when he took a light, he ended up slamming into a medium. It's on Ashland and Grand.
Okay.
And all the way from like Damon and Milwaukee. So a long ways. He hit the medium and like his door slammed. So when he was trying to get out, like
He couldn't.
he
Yeah.
couldn't.
Yeah,
and
he was-
and I just, I guess for me, it's just like you think about like, why didn't they just stop chasing him? Or when he crashed, why didn't they just drive away?
Right.
Or, and just like the amounts of just like trauma and hatred that people are living through, like, to follow through on like violence in this way. Yeah, I mean, I remember when I got the call, I'll never forget. Like
Sure.
my
It was
mom's
devastating.
Oh yeah, I heard my dad and my mom in the back, and it's unreal. And I just kept thinking to myself, like, what could have happened? Or like, I thought it was local. I thought, something happened in the area, and I just feel like
Wow.
I guess for me, it's like you see so much crime in certain areas, and like you can't contain stuff like that all the time. Like it's all over.
Right.
Like it can happen at any given point.
Right,
So.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, that had to be very tragic. And so you finished college.
Yeah, I
after
did.
that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And how did your brother's death change your vision or your trajectory in life? Like, what are you gonna do? Did that change
Yeah.
anything, or that just kind of fuel what you wanted to do? Or obviously, right, you go through all the steps in grieving, right? You go through the grieving.
Oh,
and,
definitely.
you went through the court proceedings
Yes,
too. You had to
yes.
see his murderer there.
Yes.
He's a child too.
And he's
young.
he's a child.
17,
yeah,
right?
17. Yeah.
17 years old. He
Yeah.
got 40 years.
Yeah.
Right, and he hasn't even learned to wipe his nose yet, barely.
Yeah.
And he committed murder. It took a good young person's life for nothing, right?
Yeah.
And so, how was that in your life? How was that change what you're doing? Like,
Yeah.
how did that impact you?
I mean,
And
yeah.
obviously, it's sad and negative, right, for a while, but to the work you want to do.
No, I will say, like, I was not myself for a long time. And yeah, I do appreciate you bringing up, like, the legality part of it, because we didn't get to trial until 3 years. And so you just feel like everything is at a standstill. Like, you can't move on with your life quite yet.
Right.
We would go to court every month. And then, there was my only brother. And I was there for my parents. And I just didn't really know, like, all I knew is that I had to take care of my mom and dad. They got really close. All three of us, like, we were really close. And like, I was explaining, like, the dynamics of my family. Like, we're all very close. Like,
Sure.
that just, like, it created like such a big change for everyone, like my uncles, my grandparents, like my cousins. And so I didn't know, like, I felt like through the core, I wasn't getting like the healing that I needed. It didn't ever feel like it was ever going to be enough, whether the person was going to be sentenced or not. And I feel like through my work is like, that's where I find my healing, right? Like working with people directly, like working in memory of my brother.
That's a powerful statement what you said about your brother, because in order to get healing from something like that, you have to just serve others. You know, in order to receive forgiveness, you have to forgive.
Yes.
And sometimes forgiveness is tough, and that's the hardest thing. You know, and that's so powerful. And I even felt it when
Yeah.
you said those words.
Yes.
Yeah, I felt you know, the like there's the energy, you know, like the spiritual
Yes.
aspect of forgiveness, and how you know, little by little you were gaining healing from your brother, lose the loss of your brother who was taken. He was like taken from you guys,
Yes.
you know, and you just began to serve others.
Yes.
So will you say that kind of impacted your outreach or your vision and your goal in life, you know,
Yes.
because you know, I know you always wanted to serve other people, but now you had this tragedy in your family's life that was changed forever.
That's right.
And so what would you say that was kind of like a mark that kind of shifted things a little bit in your life?
Yeah, definitely. I think, the question was out the window. Like I was all in. It was all about finding my place and like the type of impact that I can have. And that's why I advocate so hard for people, because I know that people are carrying a lot of hurt. And I'm not saying that it's good reason to hurt others, but I would much rather hone them in, service them, make sure that they're taken care of in order to eliminate that chance of them going out one night and taking someone else's life, because that's literally what we're living through right now. And I don't speak for everyone that has lost somebody, but I at least don't want to preach it and not practice it in my own life. And so I really just try to show people that there is another way. That even though you're hurt and even it's the worst thing that happens in your life, like life has to go on, and we have to set up just a different trajectory for other people. And that's what I'm hoping that I can do, that I can encourage somebody, like you're saying, about forgiving someone. Because ultimately I just think about, people say like gangs aren't what they weren't before. And I believe that because there's so many people that have lost their lives. And so it impacts, like I was just mentioning, so many different parts of my family. Then that person goes out and hurts someone else. And so now it's not even gangs. It's almost just like all this hurt, in so many different ways. Related to gangs, but not always gangs.
It's almost revengeful, but
Yes.
the revenge becomes like a cycle.
Yes.
You know, you take one of their guys, they take one of your guys.
Exactly.
And it just becomes a cycle. Like in the beginning, we were chatting, and I've also lost friends in gang violence, good friends. And it continues.
That's
and
right.
You put on the news, on the weekly basis, there's a innocent life lost.
That's right.
Through gangs.
Exactly.
And shootings, and people don't value life anymore like they used to.
Exactly.
But thank you for sharing that. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. I
No.
wanted to touch that because I know that's tough on you and to talk about, and so thank you for that.
Yeah.
And so now let's talk about the work that you're doing now, right? You started doing some social work, and you started doing
Yes.
counseling. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So then, when I was organizing like through nonprofits, I started noticing a trend. Like a lot of the youth that I was working with, like they weren't going to school, they were getting kicked out of school. And so I just like thought maybe they need an advocate like within the school system, because like education was such a big part of my life, and I just wanted them to graduate, have their diploma, to be able to move forward in their life. So then I ended up applying to work for the Chicago Public Schools. And so I was working for them for 3 years. And then
As a social worker?
well, so I was working as a case manager.
Okay.
And then I went back for my master's to be a licensed school social worker. So you need a license to
Sure.
be a social worker
Right.
within the schools, which
You went
is
to
different.
U Chicago for that, or
No, Northeastern
Okay.
Illinois
Okay.
University. And so I went there actually the start of the pandemic. So
Okay.
that was kind of like
Wow, so you just
the
got
best.
you just
I just graduated last May.
wow.
So I knew, like, I wanted to stay in CPS. I wasn't able to do social work in there.
CPS is Chicago Public Schools.
Yes, Chicago Public Schools. Yeah, and so I went back. I was in a 2-year program, and I just graduated. So I was a licensed school social worker. I thought,
Wow.
that's what I was gonna do.
Yeah.
Is I was gonna stay within the public schools, and then this opportunity came up
Okay.
to run for office.
This opportunity. Right?
This became a reality. Yeah.
And so, obviously, right, you carrying your brother's legacy in your heart.
Yeah.
And, how did this come about? So you got licensed, right? You got
Yes.
your social workers, and,
Yeah.
and you started working for the Chicago Public School, but you're already working with teen youth and troubled
Yes,
teens and all that.
exactly.
So that just speaks volumes, because I know it's not easy. I dabbled in that a little bit, and I
Yeah.
know it's tough. It's really hard,
Definitely.
right? And so you definitely have to have a heart for it and a passion for it.
Yeah.
And so thank you for that too. That's special, what you do. And so, how did this come out? Like, why Alderwoman?
Yeah.
It's nuts, right?
Yeah.
And especially in the war that your grandparents
Yes.
worked hard, bought the first house, right? And as
Exactly.
immigrants, then your parents bought a house, right? And actually, your
Yeah.
two sets of grandparents
That's right.
bought a
Maternal
house
and
here, right?
paternal.
And this is not like now or 10 years ago or 15 years ago where you could just write your name on a piece of cardboard and you could get a house, right? This is during a time where, you have to be fully documented, really show proof of income, and your grandparents didn't know a lick of English.
Yeah.
They worked at the stockyards,
Yeah.
which I heard that was one of the most smelliest areas of Chicago. This is
Yeah.
where the stockyards were, and where all the waste and all that, the
Yeah.
slaughterhouses and the stench, right? And so today we're having great weather, 82 degrees in Chicago, right? So I can imagine in hot
How
days
hot,
and,
yeah.
and how nasty it must have smelled. And they worked in that, and they bought a house, right? And 50 years later, their granddaughter.
I know. Yeah. So special, right?
That's powerful.
I know. It's
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
oh my God. Yeah. Thank you for, like, letting me tell my story. You know.
because it's true legacy, right? And I always tell people that we're always standing on the shoulders of someone.
Yes.
Somebody paved the way.
Oh, definitely.
Somebody, and so I have many people that they stand on my shoulders, and they're thankful for me having their lives, but I'm always reflecting of the people
Definitely.
that helped me along the way,
That's right.
mentors, family members, friends, that hey, somebody always paid the price.
That's right.
And I don't take that lightly. America's a great country. It's not perfect.
Yeah.
But I love this country.
Yeah.
Because it's really the land of opportunity, but it's the land of first, second, and third, and fifth chances.
Yeah.
There's so many chances you get here.
Yeah.
And you've taken them all.
Yeah.
You really taken my
No.
chances too, because like you got scholarships and
Yeah.
you just went for it, and you did not take it for granted.
Yeah.
And so and that's I know touching on success is that is who you surround yourself with is who you become. And so you had to get away and have the mindset of people that are wealthy and that are privileged than the urban areas, and you had to go there and learn from them to be able to adopt and see opportunities. And
Yeah.
now you're so aware of all these opportunities.
Yeah.
And because a lot of times people don't know when the opportunity is smacking them in their face because
Yeah.
they're blinded. They don't have the mindset. They don't have the awareness.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And fortunate for you that you had to kind of like go away for a while, so you were able to see with those glasses that could see
Definitely.
the
Yeah.
opportunity when they're in front of you. You took them, and you weren't selfish about it. As soon as you were able along the way, you kind of shared it with the youth and the people you help.
Yeah.
And so saying all that led you to this,
Yeah.
right? And how did that come about? So you finished
Yeah,
your school,
yeah. Finished school.
and why Alder woman?
Yeah, stayed within my community. I wanted to stay here.
Okay.
When my brother passed away, I also knew that I wanted to stay like really local. Like
Okay.
I was doing stuff in different parts of the city, and I just knew like I wanted to stay on the southwest side of Chicago. And this summer, the alderman that was here for 20 years, he was alderman for 20 years.
Okay.
He was leaving to a different position.
Okay.
And so, there was some folks that were like wondering who was going to run because, he'd been here for such a long time. And I went to an event in August. And the end of August is when you actually start petitioning to get on the ballot. Well, I was actually helping another campaign, and I spoke at this event, and it was like right place, right time. There were other people in the room that like dabbled more in politics, and I told my story the way I was kind of like telling you, and like, this is the work I'm doing, this is why. And, people were like, you should run, like after the event. And I was like, no, like, I don't think that's for me. I mean, not the reasons why. I mean, it's like, your life goes completely public. There's just so, like, I didn't have the money. I didn't have the people. I mean, I was just like, how would I even start?
Sure. You didn't even have the knowledge of how politics
exactly.
really work, right? Because you
Yes.
never dabble. You don't have a degree in political science.
Exactly.
Right? And your
Yeah.
degree is in social work, right?
Exactly.
And so you have nothing
Yes.
that could at least, qualify you for this.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, I just figured like, the system is set up for a lot of other people to win. And I
Sure.
just didn't think it was for me,
Right.
But, honestly, I ended up having conversations with several people. Like, if I run, what do you think? Would you support me? And little by little, I just got people saying like, yes, we're with you. And from one day to another, there's actually an IPO. It's Independent Political Organization here in the 12th Ward. So, I had a meeting with them, kind of gave my case as to, why I was considering running. And, they were like, yeah, let's do this. And we just started knocking doors. I mean, it's...
Wow.
And we knew we were up against a lot, we knew it. And we just, I guess like, when I was telling you before about like, I have nothing to lose, it's because it's like, I came in with like the best intent. Like, I'm not going anywhere. Win or lose, like, I'm always going to stay here for my community. It wasn't sort of like a career path or like a deal breaker in my life.
Right.
Like, if not this, then what? Like, I just knew, like, let me just take the chance, And so when you were kind of like talking about like, having like a public policy degree or political science, like, I wasn't sure how people were going to perceive a social worker running. And it was interesting because a lot of people like voted for me because I was a social worker. I think that it's also a special time in city council in general that people are looking for something different. People are looking for people that identify with them, that understand them, that represent them in a very different way than like old school politics. And so it's also the timing of that. And, there's 4 Latinas, new Latinas, all under the
Elected in the city council?
Currently,
Really?
yes. So 4 new elected Latinas. There's 13 new council members all throughout the city of Chicago, the biggest class that's ever entering city council. So there's a big shift. There's a big wave. And so it's interesting that, I would join at a time like this. And then specifically with a mayor that's also very progressive. So,
Okay.
yeah. So.
And what is your goal now that you're, an older woman, and what is your goal coming in that for your community, what change you want to see, whether you run for 1 term, 10 terms, whatever that may be, right? Because the work is never finished, right?
Oh, yeah.
After you're done with this, someone else is going to come in and continue the work or the legacy, right?
Yeah.
That you leave behind. But what in the short term, what kind of changes you want to see in the 12th Ward and in the community where your grandparents
Yes.
raised your parents and your parents raised you?
Yeah.
what change you want to see?
Yeah. So, one thing for sure, like one of my goals is that we double voter turnout. So we're the lowest. The southwest side is the lowest. We are the bottom 5, all the wards in this area. So what I want to do is I want to better engage. I want people to be more participatory. The other part is just like being an advocate, supporting our schools, supporting programming, making sure that the infrastructure exists here for people to thrive. And so what that means is like more initiatives, more money. I feel like there hasn't really been a voice for the people here and what they need. So that's like, encouraging small business. We have a lot of trucks, like you can see them
Sure.
coming up and down. So we want to provide safety in a very new way in the 12th ward, whether that be pedestrian safety, public safety. I just want people to feel like they're thriving and not just like surviving, day to day. And so we want to encourage that kind of change. Yeah, during the 4 years and more. So.
And so in the school system, because I know that's your heart with kids.
Yeah.
What your influence now, and I should say the political leverage you have now, that you're more influential than you were, a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Because you just got sworn in.
That's right. Last Monday.
Last week, right? So now everything changes for
Yeah.
you, and you have some power. And so what do you want to see in the youth in the schools in this ward, the 12th ward, that you could change that you didn't see that growing up, that maybe perhaps your constituents would say, like, hey, this is what we want to see in our schools. What do you want to do, or your vision to cause change, that opportunities that you had, but you haven't seen those opportunities for the kids, and
Exactly.
and I know that this is your heart. This is not
Yeah.
political talk or anything, because
No, definitely.
you're definitely want to be for your community, and you have a track record
Yeah.
of that. So what is that you want to see in the schools?
Yeah.
Because you said, you want to cause change in the schools, and that's going to take money. Okay, so you get the funding for that. What is it you want to do in the schools and in the kids? Because I know
Yeah.
that's your heart.
No,
and
definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's hard because, like even a lot of families now, like they don't want to send their kids to the local public school. And there's a lot of reasons for that,
Because they've
right?
lost faith in the school. in the schools.
like they don't have the amount of staff that they need. They don't have programs. They don't have like even after school resources. And so like, meeting with the principals in this area, we do need, more staff, more money allocated. But I also know like the ins and outs of the school. I think we rely so much on the school to take care of everything. And so it's like, how do we plug in organizations or, other people that want to give back? Like, how do they give back after school, right? And so how do we make sure that our parks are safe, and that we have the right equipment and just like a field in general for people to play? Brighton Park is like, they name it like one of the neighborhoods with the least amount of green space. And so there's not a lot of places for people to actually go and be active. And so we need more spaces like that.
So you want to create more, outdoor activities, parks,
more
and
learning.
recreation.
Yeah, there's no like dance, music. I've met other people that are also talented and like they're musician, but they are actually teaching outside of the ward because there's nowhere we don't have a youth center here. We don't have a center. So we don't have green space. We don't have a center for people, like a hub. So, people who also want to give back and like teach kids, they don't know where to actually teach them. And so, I mean, there's so many different layers of this. And I just want people that are talented and want to give back, that they have a place to do that locally. So that they can live here, they can work here. And I think fostering those relationships is what actually creates real safety. Because we're all like teaching each other's kids, we know each other's kids. If, the local businesses, if we encourage them to, have youth to work with them, I think that it creates like a structure for people to know each other in a different way, instead of it, being all these like crazy boundaries and people feeling like they don't have access, to things.
It sounds like you have your work cut out for you.
I mean, there's a lot. It's crazy. I can't even name one thing because you name one thing, but then it's connected to another thing. But I, as a social worker, you think about like strength-based assessment, and you you use what you have, right? Because there's always strengths in everything.
Right.
That's how we envision things. And so for me, it's like, how do we start building off of what exists already, you know? And so I have a lot of ideas about that. Like I meet people and I'm constantly creating like a web in my head of how to connect them to the next thing. Because I want things to live long after I'm in office, you know. I want people to have something and that they feel like it's a lifestyle choice for them. You know, and
Yeah.
like you can enact something in law, but if you're not practicing it day to day,
Yeah.
you know, then
That's good.
it doesn't
Yeah,
really
it's,
impact, you know,
right.
the person, you know. So I just want to, you know, I was actually at an event this weekend. It was a gardening event, and I was really happy to be there. And people were really shocked, and they were like, "You won already. You don't like," in kind of like poking fun.
Sure.
Because that's how
That's how
been,
politics always say.
you know.
Yeah. And I know you didn't get
So-
in it for the
Exactly.
politics. You wanted to really cause change.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
You know.
That's great.
And I
Really.
think hopefully people will see that in me. That
Yeah.
are like, okay, she's not
Well, I
just
definitely see it.
coming
yeah.
coming around for a photo opportunity,
Sure.
but really like, you know.
Want to see things grow
Exactly.
and flourish.
Yeah.
Now, thank you for sharing that. So, you hit the pavement, knocking on doors,
Yeah.
because I'm still stuck there.
Oh,
you know,
yeah,
'cause
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's nuts, right? You grew up in one of the most, I'd say, needy. You grew up in one of the most needy areas of Chicago.
Yeah.
Immigrant family.
Yeah.
Gang infested neighborhood. You lose your brother to gang violence.
Yeah.
And you had all obstacles against you. You didn't have money for college.
Yeah.
And you went and attended one of the Ivy League schools, a full ride, right?
Yeah.
U Chicago. And you got your certificate to be a social worker.
Yeah.
And months later, you get elected to the 12th ward. You know, what do you think?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Just reflecting on that real quick.
Yeah.
They got you here.
Oh my goodness. I mean, it's so many things. I mean,
No,
you.
like one of the things that just comes out, like, how did all this happen like that so quick?
Yeah. Oh God, was it quick though? I don't know.
You know, like you got elected, right? And
Oh,
I know
yes, yes.
there's always, you know, the work that you put in, right? You said you did that speech you spoke at that
Yes,
event, but that was just a result of you when you were in grade school. You went to you went to boarding school when you
That's
were in high
right.
school. They taught you how to speak, introduce yourself, how to do some public speaking, and you use those
Yeah,
skills,
that's true.
right? And so, and I get that right away.
Yeah.
And so there's always a purpose for everything, right? It was just preparation. You've been like kind of prepared.
You're
You never
right.
know. You might be the first woman president or the first Latina president of the United States, right? The world is your oyster, right? But what do you think right off the bat that you could look back and say, that one thing that really caused change and that really like changed the trajectory of your life?
Oh my goodness. I mean, if I could say it's one thing, it's like, you know, I don't know. I don't know if it's cliche. I'm sorry.
No, just say it.
I mean, you know, my grandmother.
She was a big influence.
I mean, that's like, yeah, she's the one who like made me believe in myself. And it's interesting because these days she tells me like, I know you've always said that you wanted to be like me. And she's like, I think you're a lot like me now. And it's just like, you know, she'd always kind of tease me about it, but I always just thought like, oh my God, if I could be just half the woman that she was. I think she's the one that really kind of created like the hope and the faith in me. Like, you know, I think back, like I felt so fearless and so many times in my life, like even doing this, how can I like believe in myself so much to just jump in one day from one day to another? But, you know, I try to just create space that it's not for me. People feel welcomed. You know,
Right.
This is also like how I was telling you when I was 18 and somebody was running against this person that I beat. Like there was a lot of people before me that wanted to win, and I've created space for all of that, and like I've learned from them.
Who else influenced you in your life? A big influence.
Big influence in my life, my uncle Oscar. He is one of my mother's brothers. He ever since I was little, I mean, he taught me everything. Like it didn't matter because I was a girl. didn't matter my age. I mean, he would teach me everything, like
Sure.
teach me how to pitch, like, even though I never even, he didn't know if I was going to play baseball. I was
Right.
going to pitch. I was like in grade school and he bought me an encyclopedia. I'll never forget it. For Christmas, he bought me like this encyclopedia. And I just like, again, I think it's because he didn't have that in his own life.
Sure.
And so he
always
gave
kind of
to me.
supported you
Yeah.
and
And
things.
like people gave me, and I am just so grateful.
Sure, sure. Any
Yeah.
books that you've read that really inspire you or helped you along the way that you recommend?
Yeah. I actually just recently read, and it's very appropriate with this talk, is called 18th Street Chicanas.
18th Street Chicanas.
Yeah.
Is that a Chicago thing?
So yeah,
Pilsen used to be called 18th Street. Oh,
yeah,
Pilsen.
yeah. So it's about women who organized in the 70s in Pilsen. So
Really?
yeah, it's really
18th
great.
Street Chicanas.
Yeah,
Hit it
yeah.
up. Really?
It's really great. It's excerpts of these women and like their place in the movement.
Yeah.
And just like what it was like back in,
Yeah.
and actually most of the women in that book went to college, and I just can't even fathom like them going to college in the 70s as like, I'm talking about my story as a boarding school student, the only Mexican. It must have been really hard for them. And they organized, they were saying that they were like organizing against like the CTA, because CTA weren't hiring Mexican employees. They fought for a local high school. So that's how Benito Juarez came to be. So it's really inspiring for me. And it just makes me feel like, this didn't come out of nowhere.
Sure.
Like the seeds have been planted for someone like me to be in this position. And so
That's what I said earlier, someone's always paving the way.
yes, yes,
And so, like, God bless those ladies that really, they're trailblazers, right?
exactly.
And I never heard of that book, but
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to read it.
Definitely.
I love reading stuff like that. And so, first of all, I just want to thank you again.
Yeah, of course.
I want to congratulate you. Your
Thank
story is
you.
very inspiring.
Thank you so much.
I'm sure how your family is very proud,
Yeah.
of it. Do you feel that you're going to run a second term? I know you just got elected, but do you see like
every day I feel more and more comfortable. I am learning as I go. I will say, even just a week ago, I thought to myself, like, I'm going to make sure I have mentors, within city council, and I'm going to learn. And now I'm like, wait, I want to be a leader.
Sure.
I was just thinking that the other day, like, how do I lead? Like, how do I make sure that I have a voice? And I didn't have that even just a week ago. And so who knows? Like, every day I feel more and more comfortable being in this place. But it's really exciting. Yeah, super, super exciting.
Alderwoman Ramirez, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you
really.
so much.
I'm going to have you back. We're going to see in 6 months, 6 months to a year. Let her get her knees scraped a little bit, and we'll have you back. And but thank you for sharing your story.
No, thank you so
really
much.
is very inspiring. Thank you guys. For those of you guys, please, share her story, pass it
thank
along.
you.
Very inspiring. So thank you again, Julia.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.